What's going on, Giants fans? Back at it here with another New York Giants video. And in this video, we're going to talk about the Giants defeating the Washington Commanders 20-12 on Sunday Night Football. And before we get into that, Hank, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good. And Tom, biggest Giants win in years. It feels great, man. Look, my thoughts haven't changed. I know that's probably not going to be a team that would go far in the playoffs should they make it, but you have to feel pretty satisfied one way or the other now.
I feel very satisfied on a divisional win, and I'm looking forward to recapping this game. But before we get into that, folks, make sure to go check us out on all of our social media platforms on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at Big Blue Avenue. And a friendly neighborhood reminder, this episode is presented by BetUS. You can sign up with our promo code below there at Join125. Get a 125% sign-up bonus where you can bet on the go, anywhere, anytime, straight from your mobile device. That's BetUS, America's #1 favorite sportsbook, where the game begins. And now we get into our Week 15 recap. Hank, Giants improved to 8-5-1. Daniel Jones' first primetime win. They get revenge from the Week 13 tie, I should say. And now, little fun fact for you. Not sure if you knew this. The Giants now have 105 all-time wins against the Commanders franchise, most in NFL history against any one team.
I did actually know that because I remember NBC showed a graphic about that at some point towards the end of the game, and I think the team that they surpassed was the Packers over the Bears, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep,
or at least one of the two.
Another OG rivalry right there. But let's get into the game, Hank. Giants had an electric second quarter, 14-0 run they went on, had 2 touchdowns, that astronomical 18-play, 97-yard drive that took up 8.5 minutes of clock, anchored by Daniel Jones, who in this game, again, you look at the stat line from a glance, and it's not anything eye-popping, but 160 passing yards, 35 rushing yards. He was sacked 0 times, and he was only hit 4 times. And he may have anchored the best Giants drive in over 6 years. Talk about that drive and what was going through your mind while it was happening.
Forget 6 years. Tom, I can't really remember the Giants executed a drive like that. Honestly, probably have to be a lot longer than that for a 90-plus yard drive. But in any event, I think that was definitely the turning point of the game because, look, I know that the Kayvon Thibodeaux strip sack was absolutely huge, but the reason that I say this was the turning point was because, look, we're going to get to it at the end. That was the drive where you pretty much knew the Giants deserved to win. And what really stood out to me on that drive, the 4th and 9 reception by Hodgins, I believe it was, where Dable went for it. Absolutely, I love that call. And the reason I love that call, and listen, I probably would be defending that call still, even if it failed. It sends a good message that Brian Dable saying, hey, I got faith in you guys. Our season's on the line. Let's take a risk and try to win this game. And you know what? It worked out. And what do you know? The Giants won this game, and it's being talked about a lot, and rightfully so. And yeah, to piggyback what you said on Daniel Jones, again, doesn't look eye-popping, but if you've been paying attention all year long, these are the type of wins that Daniel Jones has had. And you look at the limited receiving core, like, I understand he might not be the quarterback of the long-term future, and I understand why there are still people who still feel that way, and I'm still kind of on the fence for the long term, but as far as next year and the year after that goes, you have to go into 2023 with Daniel Jones as your starter quarterback. There is no doubt about it. He absolutely, at least in the next few years, earned that starting job with that win right there, in my honest opinion.
Yeah, and you saw what Phil Simms said about him on Sunday night. David Tyree, Howard Cross, and John Schmelk in an interview earlier this week. Jordan Renan, he is the Giants' starting quarterback in 2023. Jones this season has the lowest interception rate per attempts in the NFL at 1%, and Dak Prescott is the highest at 3.9%. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, Daniel Jones didn't attempt to pass over 15 yards all night. And here's how I counter that, Hank.
Go for it.
Remember in that first game, Daniel Jones got sacked, what was it, 4 or 5 times by Washington? And
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne had a day. How many times was Jones sacked Sunday night? Donut. 0. And here's why, right? The game plan was not to throw deep. What happens when you have a bad core of wide receivers, it takes longer for those guys to create separation. We've seen that with Darius Slayton over the past 3 years. Now, granted, there were some drops in this game as well. Now, granted, Jones wasn't perfect. He had a couple missed throws here and there. The one to Bellinger was a little bit behind him. But let's put this into perspective, Hank. When receivers can't create separation and get open, what happens? Either the quarterback throws the ball away or the defense gets a coverage sack. Majority of sacks in the NFL, and defensive gurus won't like to hear this, are coverage sacks. I'd say about 75% of sacks in the NFL are coverage sacks, and that might be putting it nicely. The Giants have one of the worst pass protection offensive lines in the NFL, but in run protection, they're very good. So what coaching adjustments did the Giants make? Get the ball out quick. Get it out quick. Jones did a very good job at that the whole night. And sometimes that's going to be part of the game plan. You know, the receivers are limited in route running and separation. The offensive line, interior-wise, is limited. We saw Evan Neal had 3 penalties. And going forward on 4th and 9 with the wind in your face, Hank, Brian Daboll came in and said after that touchdown drive, that's how you play freaking quarterback to Daniel Jones.
Yes, I saw the tape of that. That was awesome.
So I've just got to say, great performance by him. Saquon Barkley was cool, 87 yards on the ground. A lot of those came in the second half, had 1 touchdown, averaged 5 yards per carry, also had 5 catches for 33 yards, and had plus 5 first downs over expected, which is the most by any running back since Alvin Kamara on Christmas Day back in 2020. If you remember correctly, I believe that was the day Alvin Kamara scored like 5, maybe 6 touchdowns in that Christmas Day game. Now, Hank, Saquon Barkley was playing a video game on Sunday night in that one drive. He ripped like 3 or 4 first down runs in a row. I thought I was playing Madden for a second. I mean, this man was making spin moves. He was trucking people. That might have been his best game all season, running wise, not yardage wise, but running wise. As a pure runner, that might have been his best game all year.
And that was another thing that I think helped win the game for the Giants. And the reason I say that wasn't so much because, you know, you got down into field goal range and you were able to get a makeable field goal from Graham Gano, but they took a good amount of time off the clock on that last drive, and they forced Washington to pretty much use up all their timeouts. So you kind of put Washington a little bit under the 8 ball, and now you had to go not only get the touchdown, but you needed the 2-point conversion. So it's one thing that doesn't really get talked about, but I definitely agree with you. I think that's an excellent point right there.
It is. And, you know, you look at the receiving core in this game, Richie James and Isaiah Hodgins, each with 4 catches. I thought James made a couple of great catches early on 3rd and long. Slayton had 5 catches, not for much yardage. They limited his yardage. Bellinger just caught 1 pass on 4 targets. I thought the O-line was solid despite Neal committing 2 to 3 penalties. And the Giants were just 2 for 10 on 3rd down. As well as Jones and Saquon played, Hank, this game was won off of their defense. Now, the Giants were down 3-0 early. Washington has the ball deep in their own end zone. And granted, this was a game of pure field position. You know, Taylor Heineke fumbled the ball twice, and that first fumble came. And we even saw it on the first drive. Kayvon Thibodeaux was having a field day. This was Thibodeaux's best game as a pro. This was the best performance by any rookie defender all season. 12 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, a sack, forced fumble, fumble recovery, QB hit, touchdown, and the only edge defender with an 80-plus pass rush and run defense grade this past week. Clearly, the player game, and Hank, from that first snap, Thibodeaux was balling. He is prime time, and he not just talked the talk, he walked the walk. And if the Giants don't have Kayvon Thibodeaux on their football team, they don't win this game. Most notably, stopping Taylor Heineke at the 1 yard line in the fourth quarter, where he literally just bulldozed him out of bounds. Remarkable game for Kayvon Thibodeaux. That strip sack was awesome, and he is purely a gem.
And you want to know something else too?
What's that?
He might have had another sack at the very end of the game and possibly even another fumble recovery, if not for a certain incident that we will be talking about very, very shortly. So, you know, it's just like in the Cowboys game. Like, he's getting a lot of pressures, and while the sack total might not necessarily be as high, keep in mind there have also been moments, and it's not just in this game and the Dallas game. There have been plenty of moments where he's been held. So,
yeah,
you really think about it, like, Kayvon Thibodeaux is doing amazing if you really, really are a believer in the eye test, as I am. And I don't want to speak for Tom, but I know he is too.
Oh, yeah. You look at QB hits and pressures, the guy's amongst the top of the rookie class. He's in the upper tandem of the league as well. Yeah, he only has 3 sacks, but he did miss a couple games to start the season. He missed the first 2 games, but ever since he's been healthy, he's been playing well. He got popped in the eye there towards the end, which we'll talk about in a few moments. But, man, him and Azeez are really fun to watch. Azeez had half a sack as well. Now he has 4.5 on the season in 5 games. He's been fun to watch. Ryder Anderson got his 2nd career sack, and I thought the Giants really took advantage of Washington mixing and matching their offensive line. Wes Schweitzer started at center. Remember, they lost Tyler Larson, their backup, who elevated to starting center back in week 13. And the pass rush had to be there, Hank, because Washington was running the football well. Brian Robinson had 89 yards on just 12 carries, and the Commanders averaged 6.1 yards per carry, despite the incredible performances by Thibodeaux, Dexter Lawrence with the 3 QB hits and half a sack. I mean, it just seems like the Giants cannot stop the run this season.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this was definitely an encouraging performance by the defense for sure.
I thought Landon Collins played well. He was playing a lot of linebacker. He was playing up in the zone.
Oh, Landon Collins was like the jack of all trades yesterday.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he outplayed both Jalen Smith and Mike McFadden. I think McFadden has some promise as a 5th-round rookie, but Jalen Smith is washed. He really is. The secondary wasn't great. They gave up some big plays. Curtis Samuel had a big catch. McLaurin had 70 receiving yards. Jahan Dotson had 4 catches for 105 yards and a touchdown. And Heineke threw for 250 yards and a score. Now, they did force 2 fumbles and sack them 3 times. At Washington, granted, they were only 1 for 10 on 3rd down, but there were times in the game where they were giving up that big play defensively. Jason Pinnock, he had a nice corner blitz in that game, but wasn't all that great. Nick McLeod had a dropped interception in the red zone, and he was getting toasted. And then Darnay Holmes, who probably, Hank, had the most controversial play all night. 4th and goal for Washington. Obviously, they were called for an illegal shift against Terry McLaurin, and then they were backed up. And then Curtis Samuel covered by Holmes in the end zone. Holmes basically bear hugs him, deflects the ball away, and the Giants win. What did you think of this play, and do you think it cost Washington the football game?
Okay, so to answer your question, and this is probably going to sound wishy-washy, but I am going to say yes and no. I think definitely I would agree that it was a pass interference, because if you look at the freeze frame, Kayvon Thibodeaux, Darnay Holmes, I was thinking about a certain play by Kayvon Thibodeaux. That's how great he is. Darnay Holmes clearly grabbed his arms on Curtis Samuel, and he didn't really have a shot at catching the ball. in the end zone. So by definition, yes, I agree. That is a pass interference. However, here's where your complaint ends, Washington fans. At the same time, should have been offsetting penalties because we touched upon it earlier. Kayvon Thibodeaux got poked in the eye. And if you look at the film of that play, you're lucky you even get that pass off because Kayvon Thibodeaux gets poked in the eye, because Taylor Heineke has no shot at getting that ball off if he doesn't get poked in the eye.
Illegal hands
That's
to
an
the
easy
face.
sack. And he might not even keep the ball either. I think that probably could have been a strip sack. And Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my personal opinion. So offsetting penalty, it really should have been offsetting penalties if you want to get technical. Second of all, if you want to tell me that Washington deserved to at least tie this game, I have two problems with that thinking. Number one, how do you know the Giants wouldn't have found a way to stop them on 2-point conversion? That's the obvious one. Number two, well, a few things. One, maybe do a better job at containing Kayvon Thibodeaux. And second of all, how about you don't let Daniel Jones with a depleted receiving core go 97 yards, score a touchdown?
Thank you. Thank you. Look, I don't care if Chase Young was out. Washington's defense needed to do a better job, and they contained Jonathan Allen and Montez Sweat pretty well. Now, Allen had 6 tackles, 1 in the backfield. Sweat had 2 QB hits. But other than that, the defense was kind of quiet. I get it. They're missing Cole Holcomb. Former Giant David Mayo got in there a little bit. They're relying on guys like Bobby McCain and Jamin Davis, but the Giants just played the better football game. Jones made some good plays where he got the Giants in field goal range. Gano hit 2 50-yarders in this game that really set the Giants above Washington. Also, how about Heineke doesn't fumble the ball twice and allow a defensive touchdown to score? And when Washington's driving, he also fumbled the football. The Giants won the turnover battle 2-0, and the Giants held the ball for over 30 minutes. So they slightly won time of possession. Granted, the Giants also have the lowest turnover rate in the NFL. That's probably why we're going to the playoffs. So in hindsight, was it a flag on Darnay Holmes? Yes, it should have been called. But could the officials' real argument be they missed the illegal hands to the face on Kayvon Thibodeaux? And then they realized that mid-play and decided, you know what, we're not going to call this now, and then have a discussion or whatever it may be. It's possible. I get it. It's a game-changing play. Washington fans have every right to be frustrated and disappointed about that play. But, Hank, I'm going to go a little bit further. Rather than just talking about who knows if they convert the 2-point conversion, who knows if Curtis Samuel even catches the ball? That's not a guarantee either. It's not.
Also true.
It really isn't.
Also, can I mention something else too?
Quickly, yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe I'm the only one who remember this, but when Daniel Jones got stopped, I believe it was third down to set up a fourth. Where was the face mask?
Where was the face mask on that?
So
it went both ways.
Say you got screwed by the refs. Do not argue that you got screwed by the refs when there was another call that went in your favor too.
And early on in the game, the Giants were the more penalized team. The offensive line, Feliciano and Neal, both got called for holdings, and Neal had a false start. It's not like the Giants weren't getting penalized, and the magnitude of the penalties went both ways. The missed face mask on third down, that stalled the Giants' possession. I'm going to go a step further. Remember week 2 last year in 2021 where the Giants are up? Washington's going for the game-winning field goal. They missed, but they called Dexter Lawrence offside for neutral zone infraction when Lawrence clearly, we saw the replay, and Joe Judge got an apology letter from the NFL later that week that Dexter Lawrence was not offsides. This makes up for that. The Giants should have won that game. Both can be true. Both can be true. And look, I was still salty about that Dexter Lawrence play. Not that it turns around our season, but the Giants got robbed of a win. The kicker missed the kick. Lawrence wasn't in the neutral zone. Personally, I thought that was worse than what happened on Sunday night because Washington still had to make that catch and convert the 2-pointer just to tie. So let's say they tie the game. Who knows if they even win it, the Giants could still win it in overtime at that point. Nobody knows. It wasn't the difference between win or loss as much as people are making it out to be. So at the end of the day, it goes both ways. But Hank, one question for you now. The Giants have over a 90% chance to make the playoffs after the Seahawks lost. I know Detroit won, but the Giants are 2 ahead of them in the loss column. Will the Giants make the playoffs currently seated at number 6 in the NFC?
Now, for those of you who know me from the couple years that we've done Big Blue Avenue, you know that I am kind of a worry wart as much as I love the Giants.
Yep.
However, with that being said, I say they do make the playoffs. And let me tell you why. Because at this point, all they need is one win. You look at the schedules of the remaining teams chasing them. Seattle at this point has to play the Kansas City Chiefs. Probably a loss for them. Detroit has Carolina. That could go either way. That's not as much of a sure thing as you might think. And I believe they have a few division rivals. How do we know the Packers might not upset the Lions? And also, not to mention, Washington got to play the San Francisco 49ers next week. Most likely that could very well be a loss. And, worst case scenario, the Giants probably end up finishing with the exact same record as the Washington Commanders. What does that mean? Playoffs. So I would say yes. And even if they lose out, I don't think it's necessarily out of the question that they make it anyway. Let's say, God forbid, they lose out, which I don't think is going to happen.
And for the first time in 6 years, the Giants will finish with a 500 or better record. So awesome to see. I also think the Giants will make the playoffs. I'm looking at Minnesota, Indianapolis, Philly. Indy should be a win at home, especially with Jonathan Taylor out. Again, we all saw what happened to the Vikings on Saturday. We don't know if Indy will show up like that, but the Giants do happen to play the Vikings on Saturday in Minnesota. That's probably the most losable game left on the schedule, but who knows? That could be a win because a lot of people view the Vikings as fraudulent, and the Giants may match up well against them. Who knows? And then week 18, Philly could wind up benching majority of their starters. So who the hell knows? I think the Giants are making the playoffs, and I think they win 2 more games in the regular season. Now, one last thing I want to talk about before we wrap up this video. The Giants have waived linebacker Tae Crowder. They free him from New York. You see what I did there, Hank. Tae Crowder spent 3 years with the team. He was Mr. Irrelevant, final selection of the 2020 draft, played in 41 games with 31 starts. He started the first 8 games this season before the bye. Then he was eventually replaced by 5th-round rookie Micah McFadden. Crowder on the year had 43 tackles, a sack, 3 TFLs, and 1 forced fumble. Outside of Carter Coughlin and Cam Brown, who are primarily special teamers, the Giants now only have 2 linebackers on the roster with Jalen Smith and Micah McFadden. After cutting Blake Martinez earlier this season and now seeing Tae Crowder go, what do you think of this move, waiving Tae Crowder, and the current situation of the Giants linebacker room?
Well, let's put it this way. If the Giants are waiving a linebacker, which is a position that is going to at least be attempted to be addressed in the offseason, and it's one of many positions of need the Giants have at this current time, this tells me one thing. Now, do you remember when Tae Crowder kept complaining to the media about wanting more time?
Yes.
If he's getting cut right now after a big win against Washington, do you know what that officially tells me? That officially tells me, if that win didn't tell you already, the culture has definitely changed for the better with the New York Giants. And Joe Shane essentially sent a message. You are not above this team. Now, unfortunately, I would love to hear the same message get sent to Kenny Galladay, but I don't think that's going to come as soon as you want. That's going to have to wait for the offseason. That's a discussion for another day.
Yeah, look, I think it sucks to see him go, but it was the right move. It was the right move. And what this does, it leaves a roster spot open for potentially a Landon Collins to come on, who had a great game against Washington, by the way, who can play the linebacker position. I know he was a safety for us in his first tenure here, but Collins is kind of built like a linebacker, you know. He can make tackles. He plays in the box anyway. Link Martindale's defense doesn't use many linebackers to begin with. I think Landon Collins is replacing Tae Crowder. And clearly linebacker position will be addressed in the offseason. But, man, Tae Crowder is gone. Best of luck in the future, Tae Crowder. Once a giant, always a giant. And, Hank, want to thank you so much for hopping on here with me tonight, joining this weekly recap of Week 15. And, hey, without further ado, let's go Big Blue.